It's a book haul video. A book haul video.
Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jeff, and this is Not Just Book Reviews. And I thought I would do a winter haul video and showcase all the books that I got over this past winter. Now that spring is close upon us, we hope. I did a book haul video around December, and that was a haul that I went to a brick and mortar used bookstore, and I got a bunch of books there. So I did that haul, but these are books that from November through March, I would say, that I've gotten via eBay and online at Amazon, just books that I have hauled during that time. So without further ado, to the haul. So first I'll do this by subject matter, and I'll start out with crime. So I picked up two Raymond Chandler books, Farewell, My Lovely, and The High Window. I love Chandler. He's my favorite crime writer of all time. I like Dashiell Hammett as well, but I feel like Chandler, the lyricism in all of Chandler's books is, and his style, it's just fantastic. I think he's probably some of the most imitated writer, in crime. But he's only written like 5, maybe 6 books. One of them I think was half written. But if you haven't read any Raymond Chandler and you're into crime at all, please go pick up at least The Big Sleep, because he's fantastic. So this almost rounds out my collection. I think I need The Long Goodbye, and I think one more, and I'll have the complete Chandler set. So to science fiction, I picked up 3 William Gibson novels, because Gibson is probably my favorite sci-fi writer of all time consistently, although I have such trouble with a lot of his books. So I love Neuromancer, probably my favorite sci-fi novel of all time. Also like Count Zero, and to a lesser degree, Mona Lisa Overdrive. Feel like the Sprawl trilogy kind of goes downhill. And I've tried the first book in his other trilogies. There's the Blue Ant trilogy, which is more recent, I think, which is Pattern Recognition, Zero History, and Spook County. And then there's the Bridge trilogy, which is Virtual Light, Idoru, All Tomorrow's Parties. And now he has a new trilogy that started with The Peripheral, and he just released this book called Agency. And I think the last one's called Jackpot, which is coming out probably next year. But yeah, so I'm trying to now go back and reread the Gibson that I have read and really just get more into his style, because I think he's great. So I picked up a mass market of Pattern Recognition, which is, again, the first in the Blue Ant trilogy. I picked up Virtual Light, which is the first in the Bridge trilogy, and I've read Virtual Light before and really liked it, so I'm curious to see if it holds up on a second read. And I picked up Idoru as well, which is the second there's the third All Tomorrow's Parties makes up the Bridge trilogy, which takes place earlier than the Neuromancer trilogy. And I think even the Blue Ant trilogy is further closer. So he's been writing kind of closer and closer to our present, starting with the Sprawl trilogy and kind of working backwards. So I will see what I think of the more recent Gibsons. Also, of course, because of the Dune mania, I want to go back and reread at least the Frank Herbert Dunes. So I've reread Dune recently. I think I read Dune last year, knowing that kind of the movie was on its way out. It's one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time, so it's beloved. But I picked up Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. And by the way, these paperbacks really suck. They're really, there's no flop, first of all. And the minute you open like chapter 1, you're cracking the spine. So I have to say, Ace, as beloved a publisher as you might be to sci-fi writers, like, come on, man. Put out a nice, they look, it's funny, they look nice. And they have a nice feel to them, but as actual technology to read, the minute you open them up, and they're those extra tall mass markets, which I can't stand, the new kind of mass markets where the text is there's a lot more space between the lines and the books are taller. Yes, first world problems, to be sure. And then I picked up the first 2 books in the Cixin Liu, or Liu Cixin trilogy, 3 Body Problem, which I've read 2 out of 3. 3 Body Problem is the first book, and then The Dark Forest is the second book. I read the first book, 3 Body Problem, on audio, and then I read The Dark Forest on Kindle. But I really want them for my collection because to me, they're the best science fiction books written in the 21st century. I don't think anybody can hold a candle to him Andy Weir's great too, but I feel like this guy is the best of the 21st century easily. And anyone who's into sci-fi who has not read The Three-Body Problem, at the very least, the first one, for shame, because it's amazing. I mean, it's a mind blower of a novel. It's one of those books you just start reading and you're just like, I'm in another dimension of writing. This is a world-class talent that has come into the genre from China and breathed incredible new life into it. So I really highly recommend them. And these are wonderful oversized trades with some nice flop to them. I keep doing this because the more flop a paperback has to it, the less likely you're going to crack the spine. So these have some nice flop to them, which means they're going to last a good long time and look good on my shelves at the same time. Okay, so we moved from sci-fi into classics. Did a haul of some classics recently. To Build a Fire and Other Stories, Jack London. I do love mass market paperbacks for certain things, and I feel like, London writes so much about the great outdoors and about, adventure that I like reading London outside. I like reading London when I'm traveling or in transit somewhere. So again, this wonderful Bantam classic. It's got this great painting on the cover, and it's got To Build a Fire, which is an amazing story, but it also has The Red One, which is one of my favorite short stories, which I'll be doing a video on very soon. So I picked up To Build a Fire new, so nice, clean, brand new mass market. Also, I recently posted a video about The Mysterious Island, Jules Verne, so I wound up picking up the other two significant science fiction books that he wrote, 20,000 Leagues, Journey to the Center of the Earth. I'll link my review to A Mysterious Island down below. Verne is a tricky writer. I'm more impressed with him and interested in him than I like him. It was tough to get through Mysterious Island for sure, but these are classics, and I feel like at some point I've got to get through them, so I have my arms around Jules Verne. And they're both, this is a Bantam, this is a Signet. It's hard to believe that the same publisher puts out two different lines that are very similar. I don't quite get it, but anyway, I bought them brand new. They're so cheap on Amazon. I mean, they're less than like $6 or something. Got these two. Continuing with the classics, I got the wonderful Barnes & Noble two-part Sherlock Holmes series. I mean, these are beautiful volumes. I love the Barnes & Noble classics imprint. I mean, I love the font. I love the paper. They have a good flop to them, which is also awesome. They usually come with good explanatory notes and introductions. And I'm kind of middling on Sherlock Holmes. I'm listening to you retch, Michael K. Vaughan, so just take a moment. But his style is very dry. So I can't read a lot of these stories in a row. I feel like I can do Conan Doyle. I can do maybe one or two stories, and they're just so dry. But I do enjoy them. And again, I do want to have my arms around this classic books, classic stories, classic character. So I picked these up for a song on eBay, and I like them a lot. Next up, David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I eventually want to make my way through most of Dickens's works, and Modern Library has beautiful editions of these books. They all have these wonderful cover art. Copperfield has a painting, but there are some that are kind of graphic representations. So excellent floppage as well. So no break in the spine on this one. I'm looking forward to digging into this. I'm thinking I may get to Copperfield this year. Hopefully, maybe in the fall. But looking forward to continuing. I've read Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities, and Bleak House, and A Christmas Carol. And I've enjoyed them mostly. Dickens is hit or miss with me, even within his books. Even A Great Expectations, which I liked a lot, because he was writing serially and in installments. I find a lot of times reading Dickens, there's parts that are just pure bliss. The writing style, the characters, whatever he's doing is amazing. And then there are parts that are very episodic and sometimes plod. And I find a quality shift in him as well. I feel like he can be switched on and he can be switched off. Like, I don't find that there's a through-going Dickens style that is everywhere in his books, kind of uneven. But he's compelling to me, so I will return and read as much of him as I can. Next up, Victor Hugo, Les Mis. I got to finish this book. I read the first quarter of it a few years ago. And because the unabridged versions are very Tolstoyan in that he digresses. So you read the beginning of discovering of Jean Valjean and what happens to him and him getting set up in his life to set the story. Then it's 100 pages of the Battle of Waterloo in excruciating detail. Tolstoy was very impressed by this, and it's interesting, having just finished War and Peace recently, realizing that he must have been very inspired by this style of the historical digression, that he kind of just copped it for himself. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I've seen the musical. I've seen the film recently with the two Australian actors, Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe, which was very good. It's a film of the musical. And there are a lot of adaptations out there. I think Liam Neeson is in one that was done recently. The story is just very compelling to me, so I've got to get through the source material eventually. But this is a monster, so we shall see. And then the last classic, Oxford Annotated Bible. I've read bits and pieces of the New Testament. I've read here and there in the Old Testament, but I really want to do a full-on, slow and consistent authoritative read of the entire Bible. Like, it's a foundation, one of the foundational texts of Western literature. So, regardless of what you believe or don't believe, so much of this book is in so many books. Whether as overt references or underlying themes, the story, especially the stories in the Old Testament, I think. I'm not very familiar with Chronicles, Kings, Samuel, or the books that really kind of recount Jewish history of that time. I really don't know a lot of the stories. So I'm really looking forward to diving in with a guide. And not reading a thin onion skinned, I love the King James Version for the language. It's beautiful. So there are times when, if I want to read some Psalms or Proverbs, I'll go to the King James because the language is fantastic. I think this is the New Revised Standard. Yeah, New Revised Standard Oxford does. So it'll be easier to read, and there's tons of accompanying, as it's annotated, there's an amazing amount of accompanying details and information. So I'm looking forward to starting slowly, working my way through Le Bible. A couple of horror titles also, inspired by my recent Lovecraft readings. I discovered Clark Ashton Smith, so I want to read this, The Dark Eidolon, and other stories. Smith is a really cool writer. I read The Vaults of the Vombis recently, and I have a booktube episode about it. I'll link that down in the description box as well. Fascinating writer. Not of the prose level of Lovecraft, but his idea. I think the best monsters, I feel like Lovecraft has the existential dread covered better than any writer, but I feel like he's got the best monsters. Even the few stories I've read so far, he's got the coolest creatures. Like, he comes up with these ideas for monsters that's really outrageous. So looking forward to reading some Clark Ashton Smith. Also picked up kind of a definitive horror anthology, The Dark Descent. I know this is a big deal. I've seen this reviewed a lot on other people's channels. I know this is, a classic, and I need to get through this to kind of get my arms around the history of horror in the short form, which I know very little about, frankly, other than I've read, I think, 2 of King's volumes, Skeleton Crew, and I think the first volume of short stories. It's escaping me right now, but I've read those 2 volumes, which were great, but I need more of the genre, and so I feel like this is a great place to start. Also got some history in the haul. Life in a Medieval City. I'm very interested in the medieval world. I think it comes over from my love of fantasy, but I'm actually interested in life in the medieval world and how it worked and how it ran. So curious to check out Life in a Medieval City. Also curious about the Spanish-Portuguese conquest of the New World. I recently finished my BA about a year or 2 ago. Crazy how late it was, but I learned a lot about the Spanish conquest and stuff that went on in the New World, and it really piqued my interest. So I got a couple of history books about it. Bernal Diaz, The Conquest of New Spain, which, as you can see, I've been through a little bit. And this is a first-hand account of his travels. I forget who he was with, what conquistador. It might have been with Cortez, but looking forward to checking this out. Also, some more books about the conquest. This is called The Conquest of Peru. This guy Prescott, I think Gordon Prescott is his name. He wrote these 2 beautiful books. The Conquest of Peru is one, and then the Conquest of Mexico is the second one. And I found these very cheap but very beautiful Heritage Press editions, hardcover. I mean, they're wonderful. And the thing I like about Prescott is his prose style is beautiful. So it's a beautiful read, regardless of it being fairly authoritative. Now, obviously, there are more up-to-date versions of these, which I'll have to get to. But I thought if I'm going to start with just an overview to get my feet wet, this guy's writing is really fantastic. So, yeah, really kind of awesome pair that I got cheap on eBay. Also into ancient history, and I'm realizing that I think history for me at this point, I do better when I read a firsthand account from someone's point of view or a biography of the time. I tend to retain it better. It retains my interest. I love the big surveys of certain time periods, but I've actually felt that the more I go to those, I kind of zone out. But when it's a biography about someone and they're living through the time period, I feel like I can connect it a little better. So with that, I decided to dig into Plutarch's Lives, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I just started reading these. These are the Dryden translations, and I don't like them. So I've ordered the Penguins. So the problem with the Penguins is that Plutarch set this up where he would compare two lives and then write a comparison about it. And the way the Dryden translation in modern libraries is set up is exactly how Plutarch intended it. You have one life, usually a Greek life and then a Roman life, and then a comparison of the morality and the character of these two people, which interests me greatly, frankly. But the Dryden translation is dry as a bone. It's awkward as well. I found myself reading and rereading several passages. I made my way through Theseus and Romulus, but it was very difficult. And I found that I was reading but not retaining. So I thought, okay, the Penguins seem to have the best reputation in terms of readability. So I've ordered them, and I'm going to try to read the lives as Plutarch laid them out. But I'll just have to get a bunch of the Penguins, and if I have to read one life in one Penguin and one in another, and then figure out where the comparison is. And also, Penguin doesn't have all the comparisons, so I may have to dip back into Plutarch to check that out. But I am interested in reading ancient history from this very close source. The last two categories, one being miscellaneous. I decided to go back and revisit a fantasy trilogy that I had skipped in the 80s and 90s when I was reading fantasy, but it's the Dragonlance Chronicles, starting with the Dragons of Autumn Twilight and the Dragons of Winter Night, and there's a third one called the Dragons of Spring Dawning. And I just finished this one, and I found it fun. I recently did a review of the Belgariad by David Eddings, which is kind of in the more lighter side of fantasy. I feel like these are kind of even a step down from the Belgariad. If the Belgariad's kind of a B-tier series, I feel like the Dragonlance is kind of C-tier. But it was an interesting read. They were better written than I thought. Like Margaret Weiss, I think, did the prose writing for these, and Tracy Hickman helped her with story and did character and scenario. But Weiss wrote them, and they're written at a pretty decent level. Like they're better than they should be, but they're not really surprising. All the tropes that are there that you've seen everywhere. I mean, maybe not so much when they were written in the 80s, but at this point, there's nothing surprising going on in the books. But the characters are charming. Like Eddings, you do continue on more because of the characters and not so much because of the originality of the work itself. But I'm enjoying them. So I've just finished this. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to Winter Night. I would like to maybe soon, when I get a yen for just like kind of a fun light fantasy to take my mind off of some things. And hopefully I'll finish the trilogy. I've been into poetry recently, and I've done some shows, some Poetry Thursday episodes you'll find in my videos. And I found out that this book, Poems, Poets, Poetry by Helen Vendler, is very highly regarded as like a great textbook to kind of get your feet wet with how poetry is written, how to read it, and also a great survey. There's tons of poems in here. But she's very highly regarded as a teacher. I feel like I remember this book when I started my undergrad degree, like 20 years ago, that I was reading an earlier version of this. So I picked it up, and as you can see, I've kind of started outlining some poems that I like, and she's wonderful. It's written in a very easy to digest style, and she's very authoritative, and there's tons of poems in here, so highly recommend. Also, a channel I really like is called Better Than Food Book Reviews, and he'll post maybe once every 10 days. Clifford Sargent is his name, and it's my first book reviewer on YouTube that I found, and I was like, my God, people are reviewing books on YouTube. This is fantastic. So I'm an ardent watcher of Cliff. Most of the books he reads are kind of outside my, my lane in a way, but it's kind of always interesting to hear books that one may not encounter, at all. So he recently read this called The Tartar Steps by Dino Buzzati, and recommended it highly. It's basically about a soldier who goes to this fort, and it's kind of on a forgotten part of the, this kind of, it doesn't really state what country he's from. It's kind of a quasi-fantastical, but very realistic. and it's his. The whole idea of the book is that the soldiers being sent to this fort, and he kind of gets stuck there in a rut, and he keeps saying, eventually I'm going to get out of here. Eventually, I gotta do something with my life. This is crazy. But he winds up spending his whole life there. So, as someone in his middle age now who definitely has some regrets over some of the choices that I've made, and some of the years that I've spent doing some things that, I don't know, I don't feel too, not that they were bad, but they were just like, what was I doing for that 6-7 year period? Like, what did I accomplish? Like, did I have any experiences then? So it really appealed to me. So I finished it a couple of days ago. I enjoyed the first third of it, and then it really kind of was a little bit boring. Very episodic, but it had a very powerful punch at the end for sure. So this was a great, the beautiful thing about booktube, right, is that you just like, oh, that sounds like a cool book, and I like this reviewer, maybe I'll pick it up, see what it's like. Also picked up this winter Last of the Breed, Louis L'Amour, which I did read a couple of months ago and enjoyed. Basically, Native American Rambo. This guy gets caught by the Russians and brought to Siberia, and he escapes, and he wants to make his way back to the States via, Alaska, and the Bering Strait, and he battles his way through Siberia and the Russian, frozen wastes, using his, Native American ingenuity to get through. It's awesome. I didn't find enough about it to do a full-on book review of it, on a show, but it's really, it's Louis L'Amour, and it's not a Western, but it has his inimitable hallmarks. Great characters, very propulsive storytelling, a lot of know-how about doing things in the real world in that time period. So it was great. It was a fun read. I also picked up 2 quasi-spiritual kind of books on Buddhist ideas. This woman, Sherry Huber, writes these books. So I'm currently dating right now, which is horrible. And I thought I would try her Be the Person You Want to Find, because of all the things that come up when one goes out and tries to date. And she writes these books. They're interesting. They're written. They're not typed. She handwrites them. So when you go through, they're handwritten with kind of all kinds of examples and all kinds of things. And I find her message is fantastic. So I brought that one. And then, like many, I struggle with procrastination and resistance at times in doing things. So I found this one, which I thought the title was hysterical. I don't want to. I don't feel like it. So as you can see, I went through it pretty exhaustively, and it's a terrific book for facing, yourself in terms of like, why do I resist doing certain things, or why am I struggling to do things that I would like to do? And so I really kind of enjoyed it. So yeah, it was a good haul. So the last part of the haul, I thought, since the title of my channel is Not Just Book Reviews, that I did a brief media haul as well. Obviously, in this age of streaming, I'm buying much less. I'm popping around from streaming channel to streaming channel, but there are certain things I still want in my collection. So I recently watched the original Batman film, Batman and Batman Returns, done by Tim Burton, which I like very much. I like the first one a lot, not so much the second. And I thought, I want these on Blu-ray. And actually the best option was to get all 4 of them on Blu-ray. This was like $10 new on Amazon, really inexpensive. So I have the 2 Burtons, and obviously the 2 Joel Schumacher Batmans are execrable. But as kind of a Batman fan, I like to have as much as I can in my, my collection starring The Dark Knight. So got this for $10, awesome buy. Also, was very curious about, for years, La Femme Nikita. So the La Femme Nikita franchise started out with a Luc Besson film called La Femme Nikita. Then it was remade in the States as Point of No Return, Bridget Fonda. And then there was a TV show called La Femme Nikita. Then there was an update recently, I think maybe 10 years ago, called Nikita. But La Femme Nikita, the first season of the first TV show was with Petta Wilson, who I love. So I'd never seen it. And it's not on any streaming channel because it's old. We're talking like 90s here. So I got the complete first season of La Femme Nikita, and I'm enjoying it. It's it's very 80s music and costume and dress and everything. But she's great, and the stories are interesting. And I know that it's kind of a precursor to Alias, so I know that J.J. Abrams was a big fan of this. So yeah, it's kind of fun making my way through it. Okay, so the last haul. This is a lecture series that I would like to introduce to anyone who loves classical music or wants to get into classical music and doesn't know where to start. There are a series of lectures done by a guy named Robert Greenberg and he teaches, I think, at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. He's been out there his whole life. He also composes, and he's often commissioned to compose modern works. He does lecture series for a company called The Teaching Company, which is probably a lot of people have heard of it, where you go, it's kind of like before Masterclass was The Teaching Company, and it actually still is, and it's way more comprehensive than Masterclass. And they basically gather together lectures, and they film them. They get academics to talk about subjects that they teach or that they're experts in, and they film like very involved, authoritative lectures on every subject imaginable. So Greenberg did one, I think the first one he did for them was called How to Understand and Listen to Great Music, which is a survey of classical music from ancient times to modern. 48 lectures. And so there's a collection. I got the audio versions, but you can get the video versions as well. And he's very engaging. He's originally from New Jersey. So there's something about his manner that I really respond to, because he's, from the tri-state area, and there's just, his sense of humor, but he's incredibly authoritative and, esteemed. But the lectures in the audio course came, The Ancient World Through the Early Baroque was the first one. The High Baroque, which is the second one. So one lecture series just on Baroque, and obviously Bach is in there. The Classical Era, Part 1. The Classical Era 2 in the Age of Revolution, Beethoven. 19th Century Romanticism. And the last one is From Romanticism to Modernism. Goes up till 1913. So I've watched it all the way through probably 2-3 times, and I realized it's been a long time since I had. So I thought, let me get the audio, because I can burn it and throw it onto my phone, and I can have it in my ear, whereas I wouldn't be sitting and watching. I've watched the video lectures, but I think at this point, I don't know that I would sit and watch the lectures for long periods of time. So I thought I'd get the audio discs, because I want to own them. I still have that yen to own things. So I got the discs. So that's my winter haul. Those are all the things that I bought since November of last year up until a couple weeks ago. The winter haul 2021-22. And I thought I would share on my channel. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.